Sean Combs stood in Times Square and was handed a key to New York City. Today, he's been indicted and will face justice in the Southern District of New York.
One of the most famous names in the hip-hop world is now facing 3 charges in federal court. Many people have come forward in recent months to accuse Sean Diddy Combs of abuse, sex trafficking, drug possession, and more, but now the federal government is getting involved and promising to bring down the rap mogul's alleged criminal empire. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law.
Welcome to the National Newspaper Publicists Association's Let It Be Known. And indeed, Diddy is at the Manhattan House of Detention this morning, where he will likely stay until and unless he is acquitted. And the trial may not be for at least a year. So he is definitely going to be spending some serious time in the Manhattan House of Detention. Listen, this guy has by many accounts has proven himself, among other things, to be a narcissist, to be entitled and arrogant and extremely ego-driven, and this is what has driven him to this day. Lack of supporters. I mean, other superstars get in trouble and their fans come out in bulk to support them, regardless of what the trouble is. We've seen it with so many others. Diddy's attitude, his behavior, we don't see that. We saw his kids, and you have to feel really bad for his children, particularly, well, not particularly, I won't say particularly, all of his children. I was going to say particularly his daughters. But here's the other thing, and I'm not a legal expert. Obviously, I'm a journalist, and at some point, love to talk to an attorney, a seasoned attorney about this indictment. Because folks, while, as I said, many don't like Diddy, you can put me in the category of I could care less about Diddy. But the one thing that I always champion, particularly for African Americans, is the presumption of innocence and the right to a fair trial and the right to be able to say, I am innocent. You're never supposed to, American justice was not set up for you to have to prove your innocence. No, the prosecution is supposed to prove your guilt. It is not the other way around. The burden of proof has always supposedly been on the prosecution, but we don't see that, and we have not seen that on a consistent basis when it comes to African Americans. And reading the indictment, now Diddy should go to jail for, in my opinion, my less than legal opinion, he should go to jail for beating up women, particularly what that beating he put on Cassie, and that lame excuse that his lawyer stood before the judge yesterday and said, listen, what people don't know about that is that she hit him. She went through his phone, got jealous. He was talking to another girl, and then she hit him with his phone. Even if she did, and right at this moment, I doubt that to be true, but even she did, we saw this man chase her down, beat her down, kick her, stomp her. He should do some time just for that. No question about it. They found illegal guns. Give him some time for that. No question. The ecstasy, I don't know. I mean, that's not a legal substance. So whatever. But does it mean he was distributing it? As many people as they say themselves, the prosecutors say themselves, that comes through, that he had coming through, and then they said they always taking drugs. I would imagine with 1,000 bottles of baby oil and lube, they was all hitting the ecstasy, at least ecstasy. Now, supplying it to them, if he supplied it, does that make him a drug dealer? I don't know. Again, I need a lawyer because I thought selling it makes you a dealer. And yeah, Power 96. He says, "What about the other people involved?" And I don't know if you're talking about this, but that's something I was getting to as well. There are racketeering charges. Now, you don't have to be a legal person to say racketeering means that it's at least 2 people. RICO, you acted in concert. He's the only one charged. And historically, basically in almost any case, the prosecutors are known to overcharge. Historically, um, they are known to overcharge. If you run the stop sign, they're gonna say on your ticket. If you say you want to fight it in court, they're gonna throw in reckless driving along with the failure to yield at the stop sign. They always overcharge, and in this case, folks, this rush to judgment on Diddy, I get it to an extent. I get it to an extent because we have brought you the horrors of Diddy on this program. But that indictment is so doggone weak unless your name is Cassie Ventura. And listen, the federal prosecutor would have been better served to come out in his press conference and say this is all about Cassie. Then he'd be like, okay, because he deserves some severe punishment for Cassie. Does he deserve life in prison? I don't know that Cassie would say he deserves life in prison, but I don't know Cassie. So I'm not trying to speak for her. I'm not trying to minimize what she went through. I hope that he pays more than dollars. I was very happy to see that she cooperated even after she got her money. Even after she got her money, most people won't do that. They take the money and that's that. They don't go through with the prosecution part of it. Cassie apparently is one of the witnesses that the government will bring. Now, there's other stuff. These are lawsuits that we keep hearing about. Remember, the civil standard is a lot lower than the criminal standard. In a criminal case, they have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that you committed these crimes. And a reasonable doubt means that a reasonable individual can infer, based on the evidence, that you committed these crimes. In the civil trial, in a civil case, it's a preponderance of evidence, meaning that, okay, I'm not totally sure that you committed these crimes, but because you had ABC, you had lotion, you had 1,000 bottles of baby oil and lube, you probably did this. You see the difference? You see the difference? But folks, again, uh the indictment, and I lost my ability to see the you guys' comments for some reason at this moment. I don't know what happened. So I don't know if David Youngblood is chiming in. I always look for David for on the legal side. But in any event, um these charges seem extremely a stretch, an extreme stretch. They appear to be. And if he has good lawyers, he's not looking at life. The charges do carry life sentences, but if he has a good lawyer with all the money, he has the resources, Diddy should be able to um, win some of these charges, the bulk of them, instead of looking at life maybe a few years. But and again, I'm not rooting for the guy. What I'm talking about is justice, and I continue to say, if they can do it to a black man with his resources, and they're not, it's not that the feds are. Just to be clear, I'm not saying he was set up or anything like that. We saw the video. We saw Cassie's complaint, and Cassie's lawsuit is almost identical. Or let me flip it. the indictment against Diddy is almost identical. It's almost like plagiarism to Cassie's lawsuit. And so it's really about Cassie. And prosecutors could come out and say, now, um, perhaps some of the statutes of limitations ran out in the Cassie situation. I know that when you go federal, the statute of limitations, David Youngblood, goes a little bit longer than the state statute. The RNG says a plea bargain is in the works. Well, and so that always happens too. Not always, but it often happens when they overcharge like this, and that is the reason. That's one reason prosecutors overcharge, because they want to get a conviction, and a conviction means that a plea deal. A plea deal says you're saying I'm guilty. David says Diddy's gone for a long time. I'm curious if David, you read the indictment, because the indictment, again, from a layman's point of view, it's extremely weak. And the last thing I'll say about this, because we have a special guest coming up at the top of the hour, a very important conversation we're going to have. James M. Williams Jr., the Director of Federal Relations at the American Cancer Society Cancer Action Network. We're going to talk about a critical and time-sensitive national health disparity issue affecting the Black community. So stay tuned, folks. It's the bell. No bail is generally used in cases of mass murders or murderers. Diddy, back in what we've learned is when they raided his home, he and his attorneys had been in constant contact since, and that was in March. They had been in constant contact with the prosecutors. Him understanding that at some point they were taking him into custody. He voluntarily surrendered his passport to his attorney, who showed prosecutors way back in the spring that he surrendered his passport. He had been in the process. He had not used his private plane. He had been in the process of selling it. In fact, they told the court that a deal was reached in principle. Somebody was buying that plane. He has not been using it, has no access to it. And then one of the more unusual things, his mother and all of his children surrendered their passports. And he sold, I'm sorry, he paid off his home in Florida. He had $18 million on the mortgage. He paid that off a couple of months ago so that he can use the entire house, $50 million, $48 million, it's estimated at, as collateral, as bail. Diddy offered to pay $50 million bond. And voluntarily went to New York to face the music. They didn't have to go send the U.S. Marshals or federal agents to Miami or Los Angeles or the Bahamas or Bermuda or somewhere looking for him. You couldn't give this man, you couldn't release him. He said, I'll wear ankle bracelet. You can put me on house arrest. You couldn't give him that. It begs the question as to why. Is it because he's a Black man? You have to ask the question. Harvey Weinstein was out on bail during his prosecution. Look at Roman Polanski. Not only was he out on bail, he was out on. They gave him, even after they convicted that rascal. They said you got a few weeks or a couple of weeks to get your affairs in order and then report to prison. And then he promptly reported to France, where to this day they have never apprehended him, and he continues to win Oscars. David Youngblood says this is an R. Kelly career building case. And it's a shame when prosecutors use these people's lives to build their careers. Yeah, I don't want to sound like I'm all defending Diddy. I'm trying to defend the justice for people who look like Diddy, who don't have Diddy's resources. This is absurd that based on that it's absurd. It looks absurd based on the indictment that he couldn't at least get bail. And it looks absurd that we're talking what's in that indictment just does not jibe with what we thought was coming. And granted, um, they don't put all the evidence in there. Oh, but the charging documents tell you exactly why you should arrest, indict, and detain someone. These charging documents do not paint a picture of somebody that should be detained right now or held until trial. But that, folks, that's just the way it is right now for Diddy. Again, a lot. I always think about how crazy Martin Lawrence's show was. You bought that on yourself, and he did. He bought it on himself, and it's just unfortunate. Daniela Pierre is asking, does the indictment provide any insight on the baby oil and lubricants? What the prosecutor said at the press conference was that was evidence to show sexual activity. And yes, the so what? Right? So what? I mean, 1,000 bottles is pretty extensive, but so what? So what? That doesn't in itself is not proof of a crime. It's not proof that somebody came in there unwillingly. And again, I'm not saying Diddy is innocent. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying, listen, for the sake of fairness, the one thing that's what I root for. I should say, I root for fairness. Um, yeah, he says the prosecutor is black. Some black folks will jump off a cliff to throw another black person in jail. Um, I'm not faulting him for being black, though. To tell you the truth, that's his job. That's his job. They put him. The Southern District. They put him on the case. Hey, what are you gonna say? No, I'm not going to do my job today. I don't know. Uh, Jay Pa says, I hope he spends the rest of his life in prison and that his victims get the justice they deserve. This is all too similar to the R. Kelly case. And again, there are lawsuits out there that, some of them may be frivolous. Some of them may be just like Cassie's. Total fact. So you can't, um, Power 96, I can't go with that. Yeah, listen, I get it. I get it. Because sometimes black folks will do too much. I mean, I never forget the black woman on the Cosby case. You know, she was just doing too much. She really her and when I say doing too much, it was like her whole. She knew the media was there. She knew she was the only black spot there in the prosecution team, and they were spewing so much racial hate. It was like watching Byron Donalds at a Trump rally. And David says, if there's a RICO indictment, they intend for you to never go home. And for David, so the RICO means more than one person, right? Where's the second or third person in this indictment? There's not even. I've read the indictment. There's not even unindicted co-conspirators. They usually do that too. They list people as they're not indicting them right now, but they are considered co-conspirators. So they are referred to as unindicted co-conspirators. There's not even that. There's a lot of holes in the charging documents in the in the indictment papers. It's David says that's coming. Okay, so David is like, okay, just hold your horses. They are, it's coming. And yeah, Orange, I am not a fan of Diddy's at all. Not a fan of Diddy's at all. And folks bring up the Kim Porter situation. And as I said yesterday, and again, I'm not going to say who. In fact, I've seen the person is in the media today, who I was with at the time, along with another person, when Kim called and came over with these dark glasses after she said Diddy had beaten her up. He's not a good person. He's got issues. Not a good, not in the least bit from everything that I've seen and heard. And from those who, I don't even see the hip hop community. Nobody in the hip hop community speaking up or speaking out and saying, "Hey, you know what? Diddy's my man. I stand by him," or something like that. You can't stand by this mess. Real quick before we get to our special guest, yesterday the vice president spoke with the National Association of Black Journalists in Philadelphia. It was the first appearance with the NABJ since former President Trump appeared at the NABJ convention in Chicago 6 weeks ago and made a complete mockery of the NABJ. And what killed me, just from the tip off yesterday, Ken Lemon, the NABJ's national president, tweets out, and I was going to talk about Jaron that you just saw in the picture, Jaron Keith. There, the only person. It was 3 on the panel, 3 journalists, same with Trump, but he's the only one that represented a Black-owned organization, and that, folks, Jaron is a pro. He's an absolute pro, and I was happy, and he was thrilled. I mean, he was tweeting and putting on his Instagram. He was so thrilled about this opportunity, and I'm very happy for that young man, because that's a guy whose presence, who's present, um, is already what many people's future want their future to be, and his future is nothing but bright in this dying business of ours called journalism. But kudos to Jaron, a great guy. Everybody at the White House absolutely loves him, and for great reasons. For great reasons. Intelligent, brilliant journalist. Really appreciate Jaron. But Ken Lemon tweets out ahead of time about the event, right? Tweet out yesterday before they started with hashtags fact check. Some nerve on that guy. Some nerve on that dude. Where refused to fact check Trump, refused to fact check at all, allowed this man to come in and disparage Black women at a Black journalist convention. And he's got the audacity to tweet, fact check Kamala Harris. Right. Power 96 said he didn't even watch because he said it was just funny to see NABJ bragging about live fact checking with VP Harris. Are you kidding me? I mean, sometimes we do it to ourselves. Joe Pa says, I keep telling you, Lemon is undercover MAGA. It's just unbelievable. Now, I will say this, and I get what the I talk about Jaron, but the other 2 on the panel, I forget the young lady's name, I forget the man's name, the other guy's name. But I just they just didn't move me. Politico is one of them, and I forget the other. And Homegirl seemed like she really wanted to go in hard, and I was like, save that energy for somewhere else. Not that the vice president didn't deserve to be pinned down the question, because I thought she did a horrible job on the reparations question. I thought the vice president did an absolutely bang up job, a horrible job on the reparations question. Because here's the thing, and then she was saying some things that I get, and people should get, because she basically didn't really answer the question, but she answered it in a way that she talked about how there needs to be this deep discussion. They was talking about whether or not she would do an executive order to get this committee to study reparations, and she did say certain things, like certain things don't need to be studied. She felt like the conversation needs to be had, a national conversation should be had. But she mentioned the money that the Biden-Harris administration, unprecedented money to HBCUs. She talked about the redlining and all of that stuff, and the things that they've been working on to make sure that home appraisals were fair again, and things of that nature. These are the things she said was needed. Folks, the thing about reparations, it's not happening. Let's just face the facts. It's not happening. It's not happening. So if that's your hang up, then hey, you will never support any candidate, which is fine if that's what you choose, because it's not happening. Even look at the California thing we followed constantly, right? Oh, they're finally going to do something. When it came time to cut the check, the governor said, we ain't got no money. They killed it. After all that buildup, you might get little things on a local level. Aurora, Illinois. I think it was Aurora, Illinois. What Boston did. You might get little things, but drop it as far as thinking on a federal level. And one other thing, and I will say this, because that young lady, the journalist yesterday in the panel, why, folks, I really, really need to know, why is the Gaza-Israel issue a deciding factor for Black folks? Why is that? The one thing about the vice president, got to understand, if you've been living under the rock, she's married to, first of all, U.S. government and Israel have been like Mo and Larry. You name two people, Ralph and Ed. But why is that such a make or break for certain Black people? I don't understand. Maybe somebody will explain that to me. I totally get that idea of freedom for the Palestinians. I get all of that. But why is that a make or break issue here when we got so many issues ourselves? I don't get it. I really don't. But folks,
Minutes for the markup of that bill today, and very excited to hear what our legislators have to say.
A markup is when a committee takes a piece of legislation and line by line goes through and marks up the legislation for amendment so that it can be considered by the House floor.
It's very important to see that it is possible for politicians to reach across the aisle. When they're doing that to save lives, it's a wonderful experience to be here and witness history.
James Williams Jr. is the director of the federal relations at the American Cancer Society Cancer Action Network. In 2024, more than 2 million Americans are expected to be diagnosed with cancer. We're going to talk about that right now with James Williams Jr. James, how are you? You're muted, James. See, James is old school. He's like me. He's old school. So you gotta give him a minute. You still muted. Well, listen, you need some help over there, my man. David Youngblood says James is one of the finest guys in the business.
Stacey, I'm ready now. I'm 64. It took me a minute to catch up to you.
Listen, we got the pleasure of meeting James at the CBCF's annual legislative conference and had a chance to talk with him there. I decided we needed to talk to him a little bit more, just a little bit, because he, as he pointed out, he's 64, so he might want to go take a nap afterwards. I don't know. I just don't know. But
Always
James,
great to see you, Stacey.
Say again.
Always great to see you and talk to you, Stacey.
No, it's great to see you. Listen, again, the stats are what they are. 2024, as we said, more than 2 million people are expected to be diagnosed with cancer. And we know that cancer advocates from across the country headed to Capitol Hill to urge lawmakers to pass legislation critical to advancing cancer early detection tests. James, talk about this early detection and the tests that are involved in this and why so crucial.
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, thanks a lot, Stacey. It's always great to see you, and it was great to see you at the Congressional Black Caucus Annual Legislative Summit. So for the past 4 days, the American Cancer Society, Cancer Action Network, which is the nonprofit arm of the American Cancer Society, and we seek evidence-based public policy solutions to lower the burden of cancer for everyone. We had 2 big asks. Now go from the second one first. The second ask is to support final passage of the Medicare Multi-Cancer Early Detection Screening Act before the end of this Congress. One thing we know is that screening can save lives. And early screening is important because when detected at later stages, treatments are more limited and outcomes are generally poorer for cancer. And unfortunately, screening rates among African Americans lag behind those of everyone else. And multi-cancer early detection tests are tests that are innovative, brand new, and they have the potential to detect multiple cancers through the use of a single test. Right now, Stacey, we can only screen for 5 tests for cancer: prostate, breast, colorectal, lung, and cervical. Every other cancer that you get are because something else was going on and your doctor, she or he was able to pick up on it. This legislation in Congress has over 303 House sponsors, 62 Senate sponsors. That's over 2/3 of the House of Representatives. Stacey, it was reported unanimously from the House Ways and Means Committee. It is now in the Energy and Commerce Committee. The Senate Finance Committee across the street in the Senate has it. And, we have assurances, you got to always keep hope alive. I used to be a chief of staff to John Lewis, but, we think that this bill can be passed into law this year.
And it's absolutely critical. It's just a wonder, James, that even at this late date, with we know so much, we've learned so much about cancer, that bills like this haven't, they still haven't even come up until now.
That's right. One thing I learned from my 20 years of working on Capitol Hill, Stacey, is just because something's a good idea doesn't mean it's going to be signed into law. One thing that I learned from I learned lots of things from Mr. Lewis, but one of the things that I learned is that, protest without policy is nothing but a walk in the street. This is the policy, thank goodness, that over 750 of our volunteers, look, these are people who have families, jobs, businesses. They have flown from all over the United States to come to knock on 535 doors to advocate for 2 things: to support the highest possible increases for cancer research and prevention programs in the FY25 funding bill. For those who don't know, FY25 begins in about 13 days, which is October the 1st. And also, as you mentioned earlier, to support passage of the Medicare Multi-Cancer Early Detection and Screening Act. It humbles me every year when I come to our annual legislative summit and lobby day, which is led by our, President Lisa Lacasse and our CEO, Dr. Karen Knudsen.
Yeah. So let me take this question from Mike V for you, James. What role do you know what role the the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, plays in cancer screening for lower income people?
Yes, the Affordable Care Act, you know, Stacy, you and I are, well, not, maybe not you, but I'm old enough to remember if you didn't have a job, you didn't have health insurance. And
Right.
one thing we definitely know is when you have health insurance, you're more likely and able to go get screening and go get testing. So for years, people weren't getting screened or tested simply because they did not have health insurance. The Affordable Care Act, which was one of the pinnacles of the American Cancer Society Cancer Action Network for final passage, ensures that more individuals, especially those low-income individuals, and you know, look, Stacey, I'm saying something. Not everybody who's African American is low income, but but it just affords more access to screening and testing. And one thing we definitely know is that when you get screened and tested, you lower the rates of cancer and the lower rates of cancer deaths.
One of the things we talked about, and I want to get into, is about tests for things like prostate cancer and other cancers. But before I ask you that, Angela Connolly, speaking of, says for women with dense breasts, she says
Yes.
that machine is painful. Thus, the lack of screening in Black women. And this is where we went with our conversation a little bit last week about the lack of screening for cancers. And in this case, Angela's asking, she's talking about breast cancer.
Right. Well, one of our requests this year, let me just kind of break it down. So when we talk about supporting the highest possible increases, we're specifically asking for 51.3 billion for the National Institutes of Health, including 7.9 billion for research at the National Cancer Institute, 1.5 billion for the Advanced Research Projects Agency for Health, it's also called the ARPA-H, and 472.4 million for the Centers for Disease Control down there in Atlanta, including 230 million for the National Breast and Cervical Cancer Early Detection Program. What is that program? That program, if you can't afford to get a mammogram or a Pap test, it will provide that for you. But one thing that we're big on at ACSCAN, that's the acronym for the American Cancer Society Cancer Action Network, is we want a continuum of care. We don't want someone to just get a test and say, okay, you have cancer. Well, okay, good luck. What the National Breast and Cervical Cancer Early Detection Program does, it is targeted to lower income women so that you can get a Pap test, so that you can get a mammogram. And also, if you need treatment, surgery, whatever, it goes the complete continuum. It has done a lot to reduce, breast cancer among all people. And look, there's a big concern about breast cancer for Black women. Black women are 41% more likely to die from breast cancer. Hear me. 41% more likely to die from breast cancer than all other women. And, that's due to a lot of reasons. And, unfortunately, some of that research is going to go into ensuring that mammogram machines are more comfortable, that we can screen for dense breasts. So in Black, that a lot of Black women tend to have more than others.
Yeah. And you had a journey. You have had a journey yourself that you were explaining, and it starts with the testing and things of that nature, and also knowing your own body, and also, and lastly, and I'll let you talk about this, having doctors or caretakers who look like you.
Yes. So my cancer journey, and thank you for bringing that up. It's one that, I'm not ashamed nor shy about sharing. I'm 64 years old. If you're watching on your TV show, I don't look like I'm 64, but hey, I'm
No, you don't. You don't.
thank you. And so when I was 39 years old, my late wife said, I'm running marathons. I'm in shape. I'm eating right. And, I'm a new chief of staff to John Lewis. And I figure, hey, I'm going to, everything's okay. And so, the numbers back then was if you were 50 or 55 and up, you should get a PSA blood draw. And that was the initial indicator for a PSA test. And so what so what I did is fortunately when I worked on the Hill, they were testing for the American Cancer Society had testing for prostate cancer, and I had that test, and my numbers came up high. But the doctor I had, whom, as you referred to earlier, Stacy, did not look like me. I said, maybe I don't have to worry about this. My late wife said, James, you need to go see somebody else who looks like you. And then what and so then what happened is the doctor said, oh, let's wait 6 months. Let's have another PSA blood draw, and let's see what happens. And the doctor who looks like me, I got to give him a shout out. Dr. Arthur Burnett Jr. He runs now the urology department at Johns Hopkins. 6 months later, my numbers increased. I had a biopsy, came up positive at 39 for prostate cancer. And I had a radical prostatectomy. I was in that bed 2 days with the catheter coming out of my body. And Dr. Burnett said, you know what? I'm putting you in a clinical trial right now. What's a clinical trial? Well, this is a way in which we can help to better determine how African Americans can get treated and diagnosed with prostate cancer. I did that. And so what ultimately happened is I also became a volunteer with the American Cancer Society. What helped me, being in a clinical trial saved my life, because 4 years later, my prostate cancer came back. I was treated with radiation. I was, and my life has been not the same ever since. It was a tough journey, though. Let me tell you, there was some tough situations. I had to go through 15 rounds of radiation. And during that time, my late wife was traveling a lot. So I'm in a wheelchair going to basketball games. I still got this catheter in my body. It was hard. But, one thing that I have said today, if I did not get screened and tested, I don't see my youngest daughter graduate from George Washington University Law School, where she passed the bar the first time, bought a house, and working at a big corporation. I don't see my son, who is autism, nonverbal. I don't get to see him have a wonderful, full, complete life. I don't hold my late wife in my arms as she takes her last breath. And I would say, most importantly, I don't get to marry the beautiful Patrice, who now completes my life and takes care of me. And I mean, my goodness, I have been so blessed. But all those blessings would not have happened if I did not get screened and if I did not get tested.
Wow. You can put that on a loop. That is pretty cool. What a testimony. What do you think? You at church or something? This is let it be known.
When you marry these Southern ladies, they make you go to, hey man, all I need is the organ. You know how they go.
James, and the screening part.
Yes.
It's something, screenings, clinical trials. It's something that historically we just don't participate in as African Americans. Have you seen an update in that, and a good update? Are we starting to participate more?
Yes, I can say that, the American Cancer Society, we're working on an arrangement and a cooperation, a collaboration. That's how these kids put them, the collaboration with the National Medical Association, which is, the largest medical association of African Americans. And we're specifically looking to do more on-site screening, more mobile screening. I participated in an event an ACS CAN did last year with the National Medical Association at their annual conference in New Orleans. From that conference, 115 African-American men were screened for prostate cancer. 3 tested positive for it. And I will give a little bit of a testimony. Thanks to that, 2 of the men test positive, said, James, I never thought that I would should get screened. And because I got screened, I listened to you, I got screened, and I tested positive. So, the standards, though, let me tell you, so there's legislation on the Hill called the Prostate-Specific Antigen for High-Risk Insured Men Act. This bill would eliminate copays for high-risk insured men.
Wow.
High risk are if you're an African-American man and you're 40 and above, if you're not an African American and your dad or your uncle had prostate cancer, that puts you at high risk. And so pretty soon the American Cancer Society is going to come out with revised recommendations along those lines. And I've been telling every African American brother that, see, you would have slipped through my fingers, Stacey, because you don't look like you're 40. But
here we go. That's not what he told me at the conference last week. So go ahead.
But
I have a long memory when it comes to petty stuff, so don't test that.
Okay, all right, okay, man. Thank you. So really, what we're looking at are, if you're African, I've been telling brothers, if you are 40, north of 40, get screened, get tested. And the reason why you do that is because it's a simple blood draw. I know why men are scared to get tested for prostate cancer. There are two reasons. One is impotence and one is incontinence. And thank goodness I was screened and tested early. And when you're screened and tested early, there are two things. Impotence and incontinence is almost totally eliminated. And also when you're screened and tested early, you can have, just a wonderful and full life. Oh, I meant to add a third part. Prostate cancer is 99% curable when caught in its initial stages. 99%.
And the key phrase, what he just said, folks, you gotta listen to when it's caught in its initial stages, which means get screened, get tested. It's very important. The number one Taylor Swift fan, Austin Cooper, says, "Thank you, James, for your ministry."
Thank you, Austin.
But Mike V and David Youngblood both have some really good questions I want to pose to you. HBCUs, Mike V says, produce 40% of our STEM professionals. What else do you think can be done to increase the number of Black healthcare professionals coming out of the academy?
Now, you're talking to someone who got a C- in organic chemistry my sophomore year, which meant the end of my hopeful medical career at Meharry Medical College and went to Fisk University. But one thing that can be done is just that in high school, encouraging more women, more young Black women, young Black men to pursue the STEM the careers in science, technology, engineering, and math. Those are the basics of that can be done. And look, let me say a big shout out to the 4 HBCU medical schools that have been producing the majority of our nation's Black doctors, far and above any other universities. And as a proud HBCU graduate, I got to say amen to that.
Yeah, and I'm going to go back real quick before I get to David's question. Greer had added on this, and I think it's very important when you talked about the prostate cancer and the incontinence and all that. Does impotence play a role?
It can, but again, if it's caught later, the odds of impotence can be there. But even with that, thank goodness, thanks to modern technology and modern science, there are ways to overcome impotence. You can overcome impotence with, there's, Viagra. There's also implants, penile implants that are available. And when you have prostate cancer, and if that's, I'm sorry, what'd you say?
Wait a minute now.
Yeah, Stacey. What? Go ahead.
No. I mean, it just caught me off guard that you said that.
Yeah,
I had a really good friend. I won't say his name. Pretty famous singer. I was in Mexico with, and he. I'll never forget. This was years ago, and it was myself and a few other men. He called to a room. He says, "I really need to talk to you guys," and he kept saying, "I really need to talk." And they were performing, and finally, after one of the performances, he's like, "We got to have this conversation." And I'm thinking, what's the matter? And so we go up into the room, and he starts talking about prostate cancer, and he said, it's funny that this was mentioned about the impotence part. He says, they used to tell us that we had to wait until we're 50 to be screened, and he's like, this thing got me. I was in my mid 40s. And he says, by the time they found, he says, I can't even, I'm impotent. And he was very adamant that we all get screened and really watch for that. So, this other, the other parts of it, yeah, I really get what you're saying there. I think it's extremely valuable information. Angela Connolly is saying that men should get your blood pressure checked often. Does that correlate as well?
That I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But with all of these, what's important for each individual man is to talk to your doctor about what's best for you. And if they have any questions, they can just visit www.cancer.org for more information as to what's the best outcome with regard to you. So yeah, I'm just saying, don't let incontinence or impotence keep you away from getting a PSA test for prostate cancer.
David Youngblood says, can you comment on possible advances in lung, kidney, and other cancers?
Well, I'll as much as I can. So what we know about lung cancer, is one of the biggest killers of with regard to any of all of the cancers in general. With regard to kidney cancer, unfortunately, we don't have a screening test for kidney cancer. So what I can say is, what I can say in general is that since 1991, mortality from cancer has gone down significantly. Unfortunately, the incidence of cancer has risen, especially among young people. And that's where the American Cancer Society comes in. We're aggressively doing the research to ensure that we can do all we can to lower the burden of cancer for everyone.
JC also mentions this, and I think we kind of touched on this last week when you and I spoke in Washington. He says, he or she, I'm not sure if JC, there's no photo there. It says that the digital exam deters men as well.
Absolutely. Part of getting a prostate cancer exam, the part one is the PSA blood draw. And that determines your PSA number. And, your PSA number could be high for different reasons. You could have an infection or anything else, but that's part one. And if your numbers are really high, your doctor, in most cases, may do a digital rectal exam, which is very brief, but sometimes necessary. And indeed, some urologists are moving away from it. But when we talked last week, one thing I know is that, we should not let a PSA blood draw or the possibility of a digital rectal exam keep you away from being screened. The women get full-blown pelvic exams starting at about the age of 12. I hope that there's no one out there afraid to get a digital rectal exam, because one thing we do know is that if you're not screened and not tested, what you don't know can kill you.
Yeah, exactly. And in our remaining moments, James, this is again, like last week, this is such a vital conversation to have, and it's never a bad time to have it. But talk again about these bills, the Medicare Multi-Cancer Early Detection Screening Coverage Act, and talk again. Let us remind everyone what is on the table and why they are so important. We got a couple minutes left.
So why this bill is so important is because, again, early screening can save lives. And what this bill will do is for the first time, allow legislation for tests that from a single blood draw can detect dozens of cancers. Right now, you have to go to 5 different screenings in order to test for the 5 different cancers for which we have screening today. And this is 2024. We've been able to put people on the moon and bring them back. And, you have cell phones and all those sort of things. But our technology, when it comes to screening for cancer, is woefully behind. This bill will allow, for the first time, multi-cancer early detection tests, which we believe the research will be complete by 2028. But, Congress, if we wait until 2028 to pass legislation, people will have it. People can pay up to $1,500 per test. The importance of this legislation is that once these tests are ready, after meeting FDA approval, and also once clinical benefit has been shown, they can be given, they can be under the Medicare authority where these can be affordable to anyone on Medicare. That is so critical and that is so key because, again, I know I'm sounding like a broken record here. Early detection and early screening can save lives when it comes to cancer. This bill is the third highest co-sponsored legislation, healthcare legislation in Congress. Again, 303 members of the House, 62 members of the Senate. It's a filibuster-proof majority number of co-sponsors in the Senate. And right now, we're going to have to face a lame duck session to try to get it passed and across the finish line. But that's where all your listeners come into play. Call your member of Congress, call your member of the House to make sure that they support two things: an increased level of funding for cancer research and prevention programs, and final passage of the Medicare Multi-Cancer Early Detection Screening Coverage Act.
No. And again, remind folks where they can learn more about the American Cancer Society Cancer Action Network.
All right. Hey, we've got the two sites. One is www.cancer.org, and there's also fightcancer.org. And if any of your listeners have heard, like I've heard twice in my life, the three words, "you have cancer," they can dial this number, 1-800-227-2345. Again, that's 1-800-227-2345. Someone's there 24 hours, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, and they can help each and every individual as they fight their cancer journey.
James Williams Jr., Director of Federal Relations at the American Cancer Society Cancer Action Network. We so appreciate you taking out the time again to talk with Let It Be Known on such a vital issue and educating us a bit too. We appreciate it.
Stacey, anytime, any place, I'm ready to come on board because one thing we got to do, we have to let it be known.
We got to let it be known. Thanks so much for joining us, everybody. We will see you again tomorrow morning. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you.